I'm going to show you a few of the steps involved in making this gumball machine. This is a project we've all been wanting to do for a long time. Now, since we're closed temporarily, we're going to try to do it by ourselves at home. I can't wait to see what you do. I'm going to give you some tips on how to get started. So you might want to get some pictures of gumball machines off of the internet. There's lots of great pictures if you just Google gumball machine. So have some handy so that you can work with them. This is a smaller example that I've done. I like to start with the dome and then do the base. Now you can work on a regular size paper if you want to do a smaller machine like this, or you can go ahead and do an even bigger one. This one's a good deal bigger. I like to start my gumball dome here with a tracer. You can use a lid, a Tupperware lid, or a bowl. You want to make sure that it is no bigger than what fills half of your paper. Remember, you're going to have a little cap here and you'll have a big base, so you don't want to get too big. And you're going to very lightly trace that dome using your tracer. You can do this freehand too if you want. It's up to you. Now, I don't want to have my dome perfectly round. I prefer this kind of shape. So I'm actually going to go in here and slightly change it a little bit. Just using my pencil, I might create more of a neck. That's up to you. Now here is the bottom of my dome, so you want to create an edge. Now that should be slightly curved because it's a rounded shape. You want to create a 3D form. Here I'm going to put a little cap. You can do this any way you like. You want to bring either this part down. This is not really a cap, it's the top. And a little knob at the top, whatever you want. You can get pretty creative with that. Again, I'm using a curved line because the dome itself is curved. So you want to have a nice curve to create a 3D form. That's good enough. Now for your base. There's a lot of different bases you can do. You really want to have a slot for your money, a twisting dial that you turn to get the money in, and then you need an opening where your gumball comes out. You want to come out a little bit on both sides and then create kind of a curved shape and come down. Now the paper I'm working on is quite small. I would actually recommend going a little bit bigger because I don't have a lot of room for a lot of detail down here. So you might want to go a little bigger. Remember, the bottom of your paper is also going to be curved because your base is rounded. So you want to create a curved line. We're working with shapes that are rounded, so there are curved lines. This might be the edge. Maybe I have an edge here. You want to create an opening. Your opening, there's a lot of options for that. Look around, get some ideas for how you might want an opening. This is the kind of the area where the gumball rests when it comes out. What function does it have? When the ball comes out, where's it gonna land so it doesn't just fly off? So I'm creating a bit of a little indented area where the ball can land. Then you want some kind of a metal plate that your twisting knob is connected to. Also, you have a lot of options for that. You can use a ruler for this if you wanted to get really, really neat. Then you want to create a knob. There's also different types of knobs you can do. This one is more of a flat knob. These have more of a two-edged knob. Start somewhere in the middle for that center part, and then you'll create one knob. Maybe you can see the bottom of it, the other knob. So this is where you're twisting. Then you need a money slot. You need somewhere that the money goes in. There's also lots of options for that. you can create kind of a hole that the money goes in, or you can create a dip here in your metal plate. And to create some dimension, I might create a little edge, so that's where my money might slip into. You do kind of want a neck area where the dome connects to the base. This is kind of the neck of my dome. Now for the gumballs. Now these examples have lots and lots of gumballs. Remember, the more gumballs you draw, the more gumballs you're going to have to color. It's pretty intense coloring these gumballs. So I wouldn't do 20, that might be too much. It'll just take you way too long. I would stick with 10 to 15, maybe. So for the balls, it's really important that you find some kind of a tracing template. I have here, these are the inside of tape rolls. If you don't have tape rolls, I'm sure you could find something else that's round, maybe even the tip of a glue stick. That would work too. Because my machine's quite small, I'm going to use the smaller template. And I'm just going to start, I'm not going all the way up. I want to keep an open space up here. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to jump around, maybe do a few shapes. When you get to the edge, you don't want to go off the edge. So I'm going to go right to the edge of my glass. I'm going to line up the template with the edge, do another one. Now you also want some of them to look like they're behind other ones. So when I get to another ball, I'm going to skip behind it. You can see that I've got this one behind that and this one behind that. Again, I'm lining it up with the edge of my glass dome. And when I get to another ball, I'm going behind it. So it looks like they're overlapping and underlapping. Remember, you don't want too many balls, so you don't want to do too much overlapping. You want to do just enough so that things look kind of balanced. That might almost be enough. For good composition, you want some that are up and some that are lower. You want to have this sense of movement. So in this sample, I went pretty extreme. I have this one way up here, and then I have nothing here, and I have another one up here. So you want to have some nice movement. If you have a neck area, you'll also want to draw a ball down in the neck area because they're coming down. And that's it for your gumball machine drawing. You can get as creative as you want with the base, with your knob, with your money slot. Okay, but that's a great start for our drawing. So for your gumball machine, you can either use blue colored pencil, preferably a light blue, to indicate the reflections of the glass of the dome that your gumballs are in. Or you can choose to use graphite, which is basically pencil, and you can create shadows in the glass that can also indicate the reflections. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm using graphite pencils. Now I'm using B pencils. B pencils are the softer ones. Doesn't really matter. You can also just use normal pencils, just a normal school pencil if that's all you have. You want to use the side of your pencil. You don't want to use the tip. You want to use the side and create a nice shaded look. Now remember, anytime you're shading an object, you want to follow the direction of your object. So my dome, my glass dome, is curved, so I'm also shading in the direction of the curvature of my glass dome. Now I'm going to take my blending stub. Again, you can take a tissue. So let's see how this looks now. I'll show you what it might be like with a tissue. You'll just take a tip of your tissue. All right, so now you can see I've got a really good coverage of my graphite. Now I'm going to take an eraser. Now, I'm using these erasers. These are called Kneaded erasers. They're used for erasing graphite. You can use these to erase colored pencil as well. Now, if you don't have these at home, you can use a regular eraser. Remember that when you're coloring or shading something that is glass or a reflective surface like metal, the reflection is going to also follow the shape of that form. So since my ball is round, my reflection is also going to be round. And I'm just going to erase in a few shapes that are kind of curving a little bit to indicate that it's following that curve. So maybe there's a larger one here, smaller one here. Maybe there's a few small ones here. Now I don't want them to be all exactly the same because that's just not going to look really good. You want to have variety. They usually stop and start quite abruptly, so you kind of want to have an edge. And when you feel like you have a few reflections, you can stop there. I've done the same thing down here. You can see this is my metal plate. This is also done in the same exact way where I took my graphite. I'm thinking about my light source. So my light source is coming from here. So anything behind this would be darker because it's not catching any light. Maybe the contour areas over here, this would be a little darker as well because it's an edge. Then I took my blending stub and I blended this shadowy pencil area out. The more value range you have, the more three-dimensional your object is going to look. And that's really what we're trying to do here. So I'm keeping the top of my twisting knob here lighter because that's where my light is coming from. It's coming from here. But everything behind it might be a bit shadowy. Now I might even bring up that highlight a little bit by going in here with the tip of my eraser because I want there to be more highlight. This is supposed to be metal. Metal is very reflective. So you can build in as much highlight as you want. Then I also took my pencil and I created a bit of a pattern here. Some of these metal plates, they almost have like little decorative hammered metal designs. So you can get as creative as you want. Here's a good example. It's quite decorative. Now my money slot, you need to have a money slot for your coin, right? The coin has to go into a money slot. If my light's coming from here, my money slot is going to have more of a shadow here and more of a highlight on the opposite side. Now I'm going to show you how to shade one of these balls. This is my teacher sample. The important thing is to always have a reflection spot that you know where your light source is coming from. Mine's coming from here. So all my gumballs have a reflection spot kind of on the top left-hand corner. I'm going to do a gumball in blue. Now, the important thing is that you have maybe a darker color and a lighter color. So I'm going to start with kind of a middle blue. And I'm using the side of my pencil. I'm not using the tip. I want to use the side of my pencil. It's probably a good idea to very carefully outline the gumball first, just so that you know what space you're working in. It kind of helps you keep the colored pencil inside that area. Now I'm using a kind of a swirling motion. This is called scrumbling. I find this is the fastest way to color a gumball. Now this area here, I'm leaving a little bit highlighted. You can also go in there and erase it a little bit, but it's best to leave it highlighted. You could even lightly circle that area so that you know that's your light spot. Once you have a base coat, I'm going to start coloring following the shape of my ball. So again, you're following the shape of your ball. You need to go behind the highlight spot too. I'm taking my darker blue and I'm going to start working in some darker colors. Now my darker color is going to be on the opposite side from my light spot. Notice how I'm coloring along the shape of the ball. And here, you don't want to have a sudden line. I don't want to have dark blue and then suddenly light blue. It needs to be very smooth. You need a smooth transition. So again, I'm going to scrumble. And as I come up, I'm getting lighter with my pressure. I'm using less pressure. And I'm getting lighter. I might even use my light blue. This is my light blue. And keeping that really strong highlight area white. I'm actually not even coloring it at all. But up here I might use my light blue color just to show that it's a lighter value. I might even darken again. I want more contrast. The more contrast you have, the more three-dimensional, the more 3D your ball's gonna look. So I'm gonna go in here and darken even more, which means I'm pressing harder and I'm using a darker color. Can you see how it's starting to look pretty 3D? You gotta be really careful on the edge. I'm getting a little messy here, but I want you to try to be a little more careful going along the edge so that your ball stays really nice and round. Okay, so now I'll show you how to do it again with reds. So these are my reds. I'm even using a bit of an orange because orange is next to red on the color wheel. So you want to line them up in order. This is my darkest. Let's do this one. So first you're going to do a very careful tracing. And then I'm going to scrumble my way, starting from the bottom where it might be darker. And as I come up, I'm already going to decide where my highlight is before I color. So it should be about here. I'm very lightly circling the area where my highlight is, very lightly. Then I'm going to color around it. Keep going. As you're coming up towards your light spot, you need to start getting lighter with your pressure. You don't want to press so hard anymore. Now I might even use pink because pink is the lighter version of red, but I'm still leaving this area white. I'm not really even coloring that. So if you look closely, I'm seeing lots of white paper still coming through. You don't want that. You want to try to color it as darkly as possible. I mean, you just don't want to see a lot of that white paper. So the more you cover all the whites in your paper, the more three-dimensional and realistic your ball will look. So here I'm putting a little more pressure. This ball is on top of that ball, and anything that's on top of something else is going to put a shadow on it. So I'm going to go in here and very lightly with my dark red kind of darken that area because I know there's going to be kind of a shadow. Okay, now you have the option of doing a pattern of colors, or you can do every color in the rainbow. It doesn't matter. But the important thing is that you're thinking about your highlight. You're using a few different pencils to create lighter and darker areas. For the base of your Gumball machine, you can either use colored pencils. In this sample, I used colored pencils, and I used darker colored pencils and lighter ones, darker reds, lighter reds, even some oranges. So remember where your highlight is. If the light's coming from here, I'm gonna have a good highlight here. On the inside, where the ball comes out, you wanna create a bit of a shadow. In this sample, I went over all my gumballs and the machine, and I outlined everything in black, but you don't have to do that. That's an option though, if you feel like you have time. Of course, you can also include a number that indicates how much your gumball costs. And don't forget that whatever color the base of your gumball machine is, the top is probably going to be the same color. This is my sample. I here painted my base in gouache paint. If you don't have gouache at home, you can use watercolor. You can also use acrylic. Notice how I used darker reds and lighter reds to create the shadowy and the highlighted side. I even went over with some white paint and I added some reflections in white. Inside this area where the gumball comes out, there's a deep shadow, so I added some black or brown into my red to create a darker shadow. So one thing you can do is cut out your gumball machine very carefully. You want to go right along the contours. Make sure you're not leaving any white space. So here I've cut out my gumball machine. I want to put it on some kind of colored paper. You want to think about contrast. Of course, I find black is always a good contrast. I can attach another piece of paper at the bottom where my tabletop would be. You can use a different patterned paper. If you have any of these papers at home, what you want to think about is good contrast, creating a bit of harmony. I quite like this because my gumballs are round, so I wouldn't want a pattern that's round in my tabletop. I would rather have a pattern that is the opposite of round, very different from round. So I like this striped pattern because it contrasts with my round. Also, the colors are repeating a little bit, right? You want to have a little space up here, and you need to decide how far down your tabletop should be. And then you'll just cut the rest of this paper off. I want it nice and centered with a good amount of space at the top. Okay, so this is my finished gumball machine. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. Thank you.